an incredible deal. It's an incredible deal for both parties. Most importantly, it's an incredible deal for the workers and for the citizens of both countries. Our farmers are going to be so happy.
That was President Donald Trump announcing last week he had renegotiated NAFTA with Mexico. The deal helps auto manufacturers and farmers in the Midwest. But the farmers in Florida, despite the president's pleas, may not be so happy. In fact, the deal the president cut will actually hurt Florida growers. On Wednesday, I spoke to Senator Marco Rubio about the death of John McCain, Tuesday's elections, but we begin with the president's new trade deal. Is it a good deal for Florida farmers or a bad deal for Florida farmers?
Well, if they don't fix the vegetable growers issue, it's a bad deal for Florida's farmers.
And are they in this? Do we know?
It doesn't. I don't believe that part of this deal got fixed. Look, Mexico has done everything possible to wipe out our vegetable growers. People don't know this, but Florida vegetables are basically the only domestic vegetables grown in the winter. So a lot of the vegetables on table at Thanksgiving across America are grown in this state.
Not just in the EAA. You're talking about corn. You're talking about lettuce, tomatoes.
Absolutely. Florida winter vegetables. Mexico has done everything possible to destroy that industry.
How so?
Well, they undercut us. They flood us with cheaper alternatives.
Because our seasons are the same. So we're on the same cycle in terms of.
And it happens with strawberries and blueberries too, but particularly tomatoes. They dump. They basically dump tomatoes into our marketplace, undercutting the price point for our farmers and wiping them out. And if you care about the environment, think about what happens to that land if it's no longer about vegetables. What do you do with land, for example, in South Dade when it no longer is growing vegetables? Well, the next option is you develop it. And that means people move in, houses are built, fertilizer goes into the ground at heavy levels, much heavier than you could see in agriculture, and the impact that has on our water and so forth. So we can't lose agriculture. Second, we want to have an agriculture industry in Florida, and it's important for the country to be able to feed ourselves. And so if NAFTA and this deal does not treat our Florida farmers fairly, if it doesn't fix that injustice, I'm going to have a big problem with this deal. And frankly, I'm not sure they can do a deal unless Canada is included in it. This would become a bilateral deal. They don't have expedited trade power to just execute a deal with one country.
In this deal that the president is striking with Mexico, it seems as if he was trying to do the best deal possible for auto manufacturing. That was the main impetus, and that he was willing to concede things in other areas. Do you sort of see that as the struggle that was going on here, that basically Florida farmers and growers were pitted against auto workers?
No, I mean, part of the problem was some of the other agriculture interests also turned on us. You know, the pork producers and corn, for them, Mexico is an export market, and so as long as their interests were protected and automakers' interests were protected, it kind of left us out in the cold. And we knew it would be a challenge the whole time, and they may not need our vote in order to get this thing reauthorized. But I'm going to have a big problem with the deal if it doesn't take care of Florida's farmers and bring some justice and fairness to that process. And frankly, I'll be deeply disappointed because it will have left behind a key group in an important state.
What's the response that you've gotten when you've tried to raise these issues with the negotiating team?
That Mexico paid a pretty hard line on it, and I'm sure they did. I mean, they got a pretty good deal, and that, you know, like I said, look, Florida farmers' issues probably don't matter as much to Kansas, Mississippi, Missouri, Wyoming, all these other states in the country, but they matter in a very important state, and they matter to 2 senators in the U.S. Senate, and so we'll take that into account whenever the final deal is presented. But they know that this is going to be an impediment if they don't get it fixed, and if they need our vote and they need our support, I expect they'll address it somehow.
Let's talk about the results from Tuesday's election. We're setting up a pretty interesting governor's race where you've got somebody who is proud and unabashedly conservative as a Republican nominee in Ron DeSantis, and somebody who is proud and unabashedly progressive and liberal on the Democratic side in Andrew Gillum. How do you judge this fight, and what do you see going forward?
I think voters will have a pretty clear choice between someone, you know, obviously they've both taken national positions, which have a little bit to do with being governor of Florida. But when you talk about Gillum and his desire, for example, to abolish enforcement of immigration laws or impeach the president. Well, he wants to abolish ICE. And he basically
doesn't want to say he doesn't do away with the law.
Well, he doesn't want to enforce it. He certainly is against enforcing immigration law at every level. And he's moved there ideologically for purposes of getting Bernie Sanders and Tom Steyer and all these other groups involved in him. So there's going to be a clear ideological difference. But here's the core. Florida, by and large, is doing better than the country. Our unemployment rate is lower. Our economic growth rates are higher. It doesn't mean we don't have problems. We do have issues. But he offers a radically different approach, fundamentally different approach to the direction Florida's on now. So there's a big difference between saying Florida's doing well, but there are things we can do even better, and saying Florida is completely on the wrong track and we need to correct course and go something very different and become more like some of these states that are having fiscal crisis. And so voters are going to have that choice. Do we want to basically take Florida off this path? Despite, we got to do better in our schools. There's a lot of things we need to deal with. But do we basically want to go from being one of the states with the healthiest economy, the fastest growth, to a state that kind of looks more like California and some of these other places? That's the choice voters are going to have. When all the noise is over, that's a choice they're going to have to make.
The irony, of course, is that the Republicans got the exact Democrat they wanted to run against, and the Democrats got the Republican they wanted to run against. So both sides got what they wanted from that perspective.
Maybe.
And
careful what you ask for, right?
Well,
I mean, and Hillary wanted to run against Trump. How did that work out? So I think a lot of people who get paid to analyze politics these days get it wrong, and including pollsters last night in the Democratic primary. The electorate is as fluid as it's ever been.
Well, why do you think Andrew Gillum won?
I don't know. Look, I'm not an expert on Democratic politics. Obviously, he had an opportunity to mobilize and energize voters at the right time, in the right way, in the right numbers to win. And that's the truth about American politics today. You don't need money. Probably, in some extent, matters less than it ever has. I mean, he certainly was not fundraising to the level of other people. I can just tell you as a candidate in 2016, $1 million of television does not go as far as it did 10 years ago. It just doesn't, because the way people consume news and information has changed. And he understood that perhaps better than his opponents did. Ron DeSantis is an example of it. He didn't raise as much as Adam Putnam. He did some television, but a lot of it was earned media. And so I think that's just a new dynamic in American politics. And so unfortunately, in politics today, most of the consultants are TV consultants, so they all want you to spend billions of dollars if you can on television ads.
Don't knock TV ads.
No, they matter.
They're very important for all.
But I would tell you, this very interview, a significant percentage of people that are going to watch it are going to watch it online and not at a fixed time on television. That doesn't mean they're not watching; they're just watching it somewhere else, and so they may miss the commercials. And it's a challenge. It's why newspapers are struggling. How do you monetize clicks and viewership? And I'm sure WFR is doing great, but everybody else is struggling, And so my point being is that he obviously understood it, tapped into it, and it's like anything else in politics. You get the right people mobilized and excited. Nothing replaces excitement in politics, and he had people excited about his candidacy, to his credit.
Again, I'm not asking you to become the Democratic soothsayer in terms of what's going on, but it seems as if this race for the Democrats in Florida is a microcosm of what they're going to try to do in 2020. This is a test of whether or not you go to the more progressive side of the Democratic Party in terms of challenging Donald Trump, or find somebody more moderate to try to sway voters from the middle.
Both parties have had that challenge and continue to, but I would challenge you that politics today is a lot less about ideology and a lot more about the disconnect between the people who make our laws and the people that live underneath them. If you want to understand 2010, 2014, 2016, and I believe future elections, you have to understand that there's an enormous gap between what public policy elites, people in government, the media, and academia are focused on, and what everyday people care about. And they're not lined up. And so I think there's a sense across the American political spectrum that the people in office spend all their time fighting for things that don't matter in the real world. And the things that matter in the real world aren't getting enough attention. And so they want to send people that are going to blow it up, that are basically going to force change in the status quo. And the more the established figures in politics attack you, the stronger it makes you in the eyes of people that want to see something different. I think that explains Bernie Sanders. I think that explains Donald Trump. And I think that is a dangerous thing for the country, because Vladimir Putin is a threat to America. The overwhelming majority of the men and women who service in the intelligence community and the FBI are patriotic Americans, not members of the deep state. Kids should be vaccinated. I mean, all these things, but some of these things are being questioned now because the experts saying these things are people whose motivations and intentions are questioned by millions of everyday Americans who wonder, who's fighting and understands people like me. And oftentimes, they feel like the people in power look down on people like them. You see journalists going out into middle America covering Trump voters the way an anthropologist would cover some lost tribe in the Amazon. These are everyday Americans. And just because they don't live in Washington or New York doesn't mean that their views aren't real and don't matter. And you can't attribute everything they do, everything they stand for, and everyone they vote for on them being backwards or xenophobic or racist. And so that disconnect is real, and it's playing out in both parties.
The passing of John McCain has resonated throughout the country. I asked Senator Rubio what made McCain such a powerful figure.
There's three things that impress me about him: incredible energy. I mean, this guy is never tired. I had the honor and also made the mistake of traveling with him overseas, and these trips were, his theme was march or die. So we would start at 6 a.m. and finish at midnight. We went to Libya together, which in hindsight, I found out later we weren't supposed to be there. It was an unauthorized trip. He commandeered an airplane, and it was crazy because there was no government at the time we went. And on our way out, we stopped at this prison where there were all of these African mercenaries being held that had been hired by Gaddafi. And McCain ordered their release. And I said, no, we're going to leave, and they'll be released 45 minutes after we're out of here. But I just, he was so much energy. His second is he just wasn't afraid of anything. And I think given his life experience, when he made up his mind, he was for it. And no political pressure, no pull, no lobbying, nothing was going to back him off. His favorite saying, and he said it time and again, is just the right thing to do. And I think it's a lesson for me and for everybody to kind of be more like that. So that, and then the third, in addition to sort of his moral compass and his drive and the energy that he brought to everything was his stature, and it's very difficult to replicate that. No matter how, it's not just a number of years. It's his life experience. It's the fact that it's hard to debate with a guy on torture when he's been tortured. It's hard to debate with someone about the cost of war when he's paid it and his family's paid it. So he's not really replaceable, but there are lessons to be learned from his service to our country. And I disagreed with John from time to time on issues. That doesn't mean, like everybody else, I didn't admire him. And it feels weird to be in politics without John McCain. Politics without John McCain is difficult to understand because he's been such a towering figure.
The second point that you made about how it's a matter of just your moral compass, do the right thing. Why does that stand out in Washington? Why does that almost seem like something to be credited as opposed to something to be expected of all?
Well, it's not for the reason. It's not that people seek to do the wrong thing. It's that in public office, frankly, you depend on public approval to stay in office. It's just that's what elections are about, and you want more people to agree with you than disagree with you. That didn't seem to matter as much to John McCain, whether that was part of his constitution as a person or part of his life experience. He made up his mind about, and he wasn't always right, but if he thought it was right, it didn't matter how much political pressure came to bear, he was going to ignore it, and at his own peril, right? I mean, you see the polls now where Republican numbers for him are not great. He just didn't seem affected by that the way others do. Whether that's a product of so many years in this process or just sort of his natural characteristics or
But shouldn't we expect that from our leaders? I guess that's my point. Shouldn't we automatically expect them to be guided by that principle as opposed to trying to do things for more expedient reasons?
I think what stood out about John is not just that he had that attribute, but his willingness to stick with it irrespective of what the political consequences of it might be. And frankly, most people don't do it not because they're immoral, but because you can make a big difference on 9 things. You're not going to let the 10th thing knock you out of office, so you can't make a difference on the other 9. They're more pragmatic about picking and choosing your spots. John didn't pick or choose spots. Every spot he was going to fight on in every fight, and it made him unique. It didn't make him perfect. He was, a lot of times the things he thought he was right on, he wasn't necessarily always right on, at least in my view. That doesn't mean you can't admire sort of that uniqueness of it.
We'll be right back after the break.